With Brazil slowly returning to their Jogo Bonito era of producing generational wonder kid after wonder kid, it's important to remember that not all of them are going to go on to be superstars. For every Neymar Jr., there unfortunately has to be a Ganso. Anyone who grew up in the 2000s will remember this name as a serious throwback. This is a guy who many regarded as the outstanding talent at Santos, while Neymar was there already taking YouTube by storm. It seemed impossible that someone with this dynamic dribbling and wonderful weight of pass would not make it into the upper echelon Hall of Fame players. Guys saw his tall frame and silky dribbling and decided that he was the next Kaká already. For a player to be this technically gifted naturally, it was only a matter of time before he made the usual progression of moving to Europe and elevating his stardom to a global level. However, even with iconic Brazilians like Socrates giving him the cosign of being Brazil's best talent of the last 10 years, his career did not pan out as anticipated. So how did Ganso go from one of the most infamous wonder kids to relative obscurity? And where is he now? Get your pen and paper, because today's lesson is about Ganso, aka the Goose. Born in 1989, his story is not too dissimilar to that of the old legends that we've discussed previously in these classes. Football was already his priority by the age of 7, and by 15 his talents were recognised by Santos, who snapped him up for their prestigious academy. Despite a bad injury in 2007 that would see him miss half a year of football, his development was seemingly unhalted, and it wasn't long before he was making a serious influence on the youth teams, winning the Under-20 Campeonato Paulista on his return. Naturally, he'd make his pro debut soon after in 2008, and the football world began to sit up in their seats with full attention. This kid was already wearing the iconic number 10 and gliding across the pitch, spraying passes like it was nothing. Whether he'd receive the ball with his back facing to goal or get it on the half turn, everything just looked fluid and effortless. All he needed now was someone on his wavelength to convert his assists into goals. Then along comes Neymar. They immediately clicked and formed a deadly duo that would take Brazil by storm. These men were virtually inseparable, and no, I don't just mean celebrations. Ganso pulled up to the birth of Neymar's first child and was even the godfather of the kid, although their coach at the time viewed this as an excuse for Ganso to just be lazy and skip training. But when these two lead to a Campeonato Paulista with 11 and 15 goals each, who cares? Ganso was even given the player of the tournament as Santos picked up the Copa do Brasil, and the logical next step was a national team. It's worth noting that Ganso had already played for the under-20s in the World Cup that would see them go all the way to the final and lose to my country Ghana. And some were already not keen on his lack of intensity and work rate. While Ganso made passes that looked like the game was being played in slow motion, some would argue that he was running like he was in quicksand himself. A year later though, he was now in his prime, with every man and their dog barking at Dunga outside his house to convince him to take both Neymar and Ganso to the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. As I mentioned previously, to have brothers like Socrates calling you the best talent of the last 10 years, you have to have something special about you. They wanted this guy to be their Kaká backup should anything go wrong. Sadly, the tournament came too soon for them both, and they stayed in Brazil amidst interest from all of Europe, especially after picking up another Libertadores in 2011. Another 6-month knee injury would follow, but that didn't stop Ganso from believing the hype himself, even agreeing with guys when they would say that he's the next Zidane. City swooped in for him, but he aired them and said, nah, I'm waiting for a big club like Barca, Madrid or Milan. Well, in 2012, he did get a move away from Santos, but not to where we all expected. After playing every game for Brazil in the 2011 Copa America, it seemed inevitable that we'd see him lining up alongside Ronaldo or Messi in El Clasico. But after making his desire to leave clear for all to see, the fans were booing him and treating him like a mercenary. The next year, he got a £9 million move to São Paulo to replace the departing Lucas Moura of all people. When presented with a number 8 shirt, he called it a dream come true to be at the club. His performances were anything but a dream though, as his form fluctuated throughout. At times he'd show signs of the marvellous magic that made him such hot property in the first place, and other times he'd frustrate with his lack of effort and pressing compared to his teammates. While the Goose tried to get back in shape, his best friend Neymar was getting a 90 million move to Barcelona. That's 10 times more than his former partner in crime. Ganso tried to get his own career back on track, and after a poor start to 2014, Sao Paulo gave him the number 10 shirt to spark some life into him. Suddenly things changed and whispers of Europe were now back on the cards. With Ganso now cooking again, Sevilla manager São Paulo saw the ingredients. He smelt what he was cooking and he said, yeah, I can work with this. And with that, he got his European adventure at long last in 2016, at the age of 26. Better late than never, perhaps. There's a saying that goes, form is temporary, class is permanent. That saying unfortunately does not translate as much between different leagues, something that Seedorf himself alluded to during the move. Clarence himself played in Brazil during his later years, and even watching back then he said that it would not bang for Ganso, because you can't come with that lack of effort and expect to succeed in Europe. Unfortunately for Ganso and the football world as a whole, Seedorf was low-key right. It took him until April the next year to bag his first 2 goals, embracing a 2-0 win over Granada to be fair. He was doing his best to reignite that international career, but that door had sadly been closed since 2012. His best achievement for his country will be a silver medal at the 2012 London Olympics, a tournament that a lot of countries just send some random players to and have a bit of a laugh. After 2 years at Sevilla, he'd only made 18 league appearances, scoring 4 league goals in the process. Obviously, his game was not centered around goals, but his overall impact was deemed insufficient and he was sent on loan to Ligue 1 Amiens in 2018. Guess who else was in Ligue 1 at the time? Yep, the most expensive footballer in history. £220 million Neymar was now a bona fide superstar looking to build upon his legacy, trying to turn PSG into a European powerhouse with the backing of an entire state behind them. Meanwhile, Ganso was in a relegation scrap trying to remind guys that he could play a bit too. Once again, whether you want to put it down to the injuries or a lack of effort, it seems that that quote from his Santos coach 10 years earlier about looking for any excuse to skip training will come into fruition. For all the nice little flicks and tricks, he just couldn't click into gear again. You look at these clips of him in Brazil and then compare it to his time in France, and they're almost night and day. He said himself that he was sad in Seville not being able to play, but here he felt at home, and even his old friend wished him luck upon his arrival, and as you can see, he did his best to cook against PSG. In the end, they'd scraped survival by 4 points, and Ganso decided that he's going to go home. In January 2019, Ganso had reached the end of his European adventure and was now back home in Brazil, this time with Fluminense. The Goose was finally back in water in an environment where he could demonstrate his undeniable talents once again. After 5 straight years of failing to play more than 12 league games in a season, he managed 28 in his first year back there. His penetrative passing was a joy to behold, and he even had a good eye for goal when needed. But at 30, his dream of getting that last international call-up were a little too far-fetched. After a few trophyless years, the silverware started flowing like water, winning the Campeonato Carioca in 2022 and 2023, accompanied by the Taça Guanabara in both seasons too. He'd have a solid impact on their win in the Copa Libertadores 2023, and now in 2024, he's added the Recopa Sudamericana to his cabinet. In fact, Fluminense recently became the club where he'd make the most appearances with 164, surpassing his 159 games for São Paulo and 121 for Santos. So what next for Ganso? Now aged 34, it seems all but certain that his career will gradually wind down from here, and there will be no more European expeditions. The fact he's even playing at this age is somewhat impressive, given the usual propensity of Brazilians to hit the age of 30 and just pack it all up. We often label these players as failed wonderkids, but it's important to clarify that these men have achieved more than 99.9% of us could have dreamed when we grew up wanting to be footballers. Did he reach that height of Neymar? No, but Ganso can hold his head high in the knowledge that he was privileged enough to put on football's heaviest shirt a total of 8 times during his prime. Perhaps he may have some regrets about how he maintained himself in the earlier years, but at the end of the day, sometimes not everyone is destined to be the greatest player of all time. Some players play the game for vibes, some play purely for money, and others want to create long-lasting legacies. Whatever the case with Ganso, let it serve as a lesson to everyone in any profession that hard work comes above all. I'll remember him as that mythical footballer that had guys scouting for YouTube tapes back in the day. If this is your first time getting to watch him properly, like this video if you learned something new. Every now and then, between all the legendary players we have lessons on, I want to throw in a "Where Are They Now" type video for wonder kids who didn't quite hit the heights expected of them. So let me know what players you want to hear about next, and subscribe to the channel for new lessons every Monday. Class dismissed. Bosh.